Hey everyone, Arin Darcan here, and today I'm going to show you how to finally get your leads to show up for either your appointments, for your B2B leads, or for your clients' appointments. For those who don't know me, I've been running my own white label call center for agencies for the past 3 years, helping some massive brands with their own call centers like Gym Launch and some other 8-figure agencies. And now I run a program called Call Center Mastery where I teach agency owners how to either start a call center from scratch or level up their existing call center to fix all their ISA headaches, fix all their reporting, and get all the systems locked in to finally get way better results for their clients. And like I said, in this video, I want to explain how to finally get your clients' leads to show up for their appointments or show up for your own appointments if they're your leads, okay? So let's jump straight in. The first thing is the biggest levers to pull when it comes to show rate, and they're the simplest ones as well, is calendar availability, or availability, I'm not sure, either way, calendar availability, and then also the how far out you book people, right? So I'll put in how many days out. And everyone probably already knows this. If you're watching this video and you're an agency owner, you probably already know these things. You're like, Aaron, yeah, we all know this stuff. Like, fix your calendar availability, don't book too far out. We all know that kind of stuff, right? But I want to explain why these two things are such powerful levers when it comes to show rate. So then you can think in a different mindset and actually start figuring out other ways to improve your show rate, right? So the best way to explain this, if I move this out a little bit, is I want you to imagine a graph that looks like this. And what we have is on the left-hand side here, we have motivation, and on the bottom, we have time, okay? When someone first sees an ad from someone, whether it's one of your clients or whether it's you or whoever it is, right? They see an ad and they opt in. At that moment, they're extremely motivated. They're in pain. We know they're motivated because of the fact that they actually submitted their information and booked a call in with you. So we know at that point, they're at like peak pain. They want to get their problem sorted, right? The problem is that as soon as they book that call, you're on a ticking time bomb. Their motivation is going to only drop lower beyond that call, right? So for example, let's say this is time 0. This is when they book the call, right? Let's say someone books in, motivation super high, right? It might be up here, right? So like I said, from that point on, their motivation is going to literally drop exponentially. So it's going to drop like this, like this, like this, like this, like this, like this, right? And it'll start to even out near the end. Okay, and so this could be, for example, 1 day after, then this bit here could be 2 days after, and this bit here could be 3 days after, right? And so obviously the first thing, you want to book people in as soon as you can for this exact reason, right? There'll probably be so many times that you've opted in for an ad or you've seen something, you're like, this looks really cool. You sign up for it or you do something with it. And then like 2 days later, you're like, oh, I can't bother to do that anymore. Like, oh, that's not really a problem anymore. It could be an ad from like a dentist, right? Maybe your tooth's hurting at the time. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, your tooth's not really hurting that much anymore. Or you got used to the pain. And you're like, to have to drive to the dentist, I've got to sit in the reception, it's too much effort, right? And all of a sudden your motivation, right, has dropped so much you don't really care anymore, right? So the first thing we want to do is obviously, like I said, try and book this in as soon as we can to try and keep our motivation as high as we can. If we can book the same day, 1 day out, 2 days out, whatever it is, then our motivation is still high and then we're good to go, right? The other thing to mention on this graph is the friction. Okay, so friction is going to be somewhere along the motivation point. So for example, we could put friction up here, right? Or it could be down here or whatever it is, right? This is essentially the threshold for someone to actually attend the meeting and do what they say they're going to do, right? So if the friction's super high, right, to attend a meeting, that means that the person has to be way more motivated to actually attend, right? And let me give you an example of this. Let's say you wanted to work out, right? And you wanted to get fit and you wanted to lose all this weight and you opted in on Facebook and you saw an ad that says you're going to lose weight and you're like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen. I can't wait to do this, right? Your motivation is super high, right? And maybe the friction for that appointment is you need to drive 30 minutes to a gym. When you get to the gym, you don't know where the parking is. You're not sure who you're meeting, right? Maybe they didn't say who you're actually meeting. So you're going to like turn up and like awkwardly stand there and be like, I think I have an appointment here. I don't know. I wasn't really told who to meet. Like all these kind of things that people probably aren't doing in their nurture, which you should be, right? Like, for example, talking about parking, talking about Google Maps information, making people feel comfortable and actually welcome to the gym or whatever niche you're in, right? All that kind of stuff adds massively to the friction, right? So let's say you've got all this awkward stuff, it wasn't very good, the nurture was terrible, everything was bad, right? The parking's bad, you don't know where you're going, all that kind of stuff, right? The friction is super high, right? The friction's like all the way up here. So now, if you literally put them the same day, that person had such a high motivation, they still would have turned up. Because they're like, I'm so motivated, like I want to lose weight, I'm so pumped for this, like they're just going to plow through and they still would have turned up because their motivation level is higher than the friction level, which is here, right? It's higher. So therefore, they still would have attended because the threshold is the friction level. Let's say you were a personal trainer that went to people's homes, brought all your stuff with them, and literally worked out with them in their home, in their living room, right? So a person might book 3 days later and their motivation might be half what it was previously. However, the friction to work out is like barely anything. The person's literally sitting in their house, right? They're already sitting in their living room. They're literally watching TV. You knock at the door. So the friction is they have to stand up, walk to the door, let you in, right? But then once you're in the house, like the frictions actually, it's too awkward to say I don't want to do it anymore. The accountability side of it is actually to not do it will actually increase the friction. To not do it will be a bad thing because like you have to go through the awkwardness, and that's even more friction than just doing the exercise, right? So the friction level to actually do the exercise is all the way down here, right? So it doesn't even matter if you book them like 2 weeks later. Like, as providing the motivation doesn't drop too low, then it's still so easy to get them to attend and actually work out and do the appointment. So like I said, this is why booking people in as soon as you can is why it's so important for show rate. It's not just a thing that people say. It's because of this exact reason I'm explaining here, right? The second thing, like I said, is calendar availability, right? So if I draw another quick graph for you over here, exactly the same graph, motivation and time. Okay. This time, rather than calendar availability, so we're not looking at how far out, all that still does play a part. Now we're talking about mainly friction. So now this time around with the calendar availability massively impacts the friction that I was just talking about. Okay, so for example, a lot of small business owners, they're a little bit like divas and they think they're like some super important business person and they can only take appointments at certain times of the day, right? They might say, oh, I only do sales consultations at 2 p.m. on Fridays and I also do them at 4 p.m. on Wednesdays. They're the only 2 days. And so many agency owners fall for this trap and they go, okay, no worries, we'll book people in for them time. Please just pay me money. And they just fall into this trap, which it never works, right? And they might book people in for 2 p.m. and they might book people in for 4 p.m., right? But people are really unlikely to show to these appointments. And let me explain why. When people are at the highest motivation point, right? So back up here, when someone books the appointment, they're all the way up here, they're super motivated, they want to lose weight, or they want to get, their tooth fixed, whatever it is, right? They're super motivated. At that time, when you say to them, hey, can you do 2 p.m. on Friday? They're like, oh, you know what? I've actually got work until 5, but what I'll do is I'll ask my boss to take my lunch break a little bit later in the day. And as long as he's cool with that, then I'll turn up. Yeah, it'll be fine. I'll book in for 2 p.m. Friday, right? And then obviously the appointment set is like, great, another appointment. Thanks, 2 p.m. Friday. And you're happy, you're like, got my client an appointment. Everyone's happy. Great. Until Friday turns up, right? When Friday comes around, what happens is, first of all, let's say Friday is over here and the person, I don't know, maybe this is like Wednesday over here, right? So obviously, like we just discussed, the motivation's already be dropping from that point onwards, right? But the other thing now is that the friction level is way higher, right? So maybe, let's say if you offered it at 7 p.m. on Friday, if you did it at 7 p.m. on Friday, the friction might be like down here, right? And you still hit that threshold for them to turn up because it's like 7 p.m. on a Friday. They maybe haven't got much going on anyway. Maybe they just come home from work. They normally like have some food and they kind of relax. So they're just going to sit home at bored anyway on Fridays. So they're like, I might as well just turn up to this thing and do whatever I said I was going to do, right? But the problem is you said 2 p.m. on Friday and you force them to do a slot at 2 p.m. on Friday, right? So the problem here is that now the friction is way higher. The reason why the friction's way higher is because they've got to ask their boss if they can have time off. They've got to rush between lunch break. Then maybe they've got to skip their lunch, which is painful. People don't want to skip food, right? All these other things compile onto each other. Now 2 p.m. rolls around and they actually forgot to ask their boss if they can move their lunch break, and that's like the same day, and they don't ask their boss the same day, and then it's a bit awkward. Maybe they're trying to email them, but they're like a little bit sheepish about it. Like all of this stuff just starts to add up, and the friction becomes way too much to the point where they just don't turn up to the appointment, right? However, like I said, if you offered maybe on Fridays, if you offered 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., right? Now, and you say to them, hey, what works best for you? And they say, oh, you know what's best for me? 8 p.m. is best for me, right? They're like, great, cool, we'll lock that in for you, right? But what a lot of appointment setters do is they go, oh, I haven't got 8 p.m., but I've got 3 p.m. How does that work? And we have this whole cycle, like I just said, where they're like, oh, at the time, they agree because they're super motivated, but when Friday rolls around, they're not actually going to turn up because the friction's way too high. And the other thing to think about with this stuff as well is like, most people work 9 to 5. They work 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday. So if your client doesn't offer any weekend slots, that's an issue. If they don't offer any evening slots, that's an issue. Also, it does depend on your niche. Let's say you're targeting stay-at-home mums. They can do like 10 a.m. They can do 1 p.m., right? Because that's the times they're free. Their kids are at school and they're able to, like, they've got a bit of free time in the day. But what they can't do is 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m. because they're putting their kids to bed and they're making dinner for their families or whatever they're doing, right? So all this kind of stuff is really niche dependent. So what I want you to do is think about your niche, think about the leads you're generating, think about their lives, and think about what works best for them. And you need to have a really honest conversation with your client, whether it's the client that you've got at the moment or your future clients. You need to be like, hey, look, we only produce the best results for our clients. And so because of this, we need to make sure that we've got availability Monday to Saturday between the hours of blah, blah, and blah, blah. Again, whatever works best for your niche and your leads, right? These are the slots we have to have available. Maybe even you've got to tell them to do Sundays. And if they're not willing to do that, then don't bring them on as a client, because all they're going to do is join. You're going to set these false expectations about how amazing you guys are, and they're going to get loads of no-shows, and the whole thing's going to be a mess, and they're going to end up charging back, and it's going to be horrible. This is the thing that differentiates really experienced, successful agency owners compared to new agency owners that are just desperate for a bit of cash and just can't bear to turn a client away. And going back to the example with the guy on his lunch break, it could be anything, right? It could be like a mum usually picks their kids up from school at 3 p.m. and they're going to ask their mums to go pick the kids up from school, and they're going to attend this thing, whatever they're going to agree to, right? But then again, the time rolls around, they forget to ask their mum. There's loads of these things that people like agree to, and they think at the time they'll be able to find cover for it, or they'll be able to get away with it and not do certain things, blah, 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 blah. But then the time rolls around and then they forget to do it, and then again, the friction's way too high. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you learned something. If you did, please consider liking the video, subscribe to the channel. Would love to have you here. If you've got any questions, please comment them down below. I'll be more than happy to help. And thanks for watching.